Hey guys, it's Jerry with Hillbilly Horror Stories. I'm going to leave you here with a little snippet of one of our latest episodes. If you like what you hear and you want to hear the rest of the episode or any of our other episodes, just go over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeart, anywhere that you get podcasts. Subscribe to Hillbilly Horror Stories, and you can listen to as many episodes as you want, absolutely free of charge. And please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button and click to be notified. Tracy, we haven't done a cryptid episode in a while, so let's do one today. I can honestly say, and I know I say a lot of these are, great episodes, blah, 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 blah. This might be my favorite episode in the 7 years that we've been doing this.
Well, daggone. I can't wait to hear this.
It's at least going to be my favorite in the last several years.
Okay.
I cannot believe I didn't know this story. This is obviously, if you're into cryptids, you may already know this story. I've never heard it, but I thought it was the most fascinating of every cryptid story I've ever heard. Are you ready?
I'm excited.
You're going to need to take a deep breath for this one because this one's an edge of your seat all the way through.
Should I go to the bathroom first?
I don't know why I bought that funnel and hose for, if that's the case.
Oh, that's true. In case of emergencies,
All right. I can't say for sure if this is a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch story, but I'm pretty sure that it is. Regardless of what it actually is, it's some type of a cryptid involved. And it's just fascinating. So this is a story from the mid-1960s in Copalis Beach, Washington. Copalis Beach is like a few hours from the Seattle area.
Okay.
Did you say okay?
I saw okay.
Oh.
Okie dokie.
This story involves a family that includes the dad, whose name is John, the wife, whose name is Sue, and their two sons, John Jr. and Timothy. John Jr. is 12 years old, and Timothy is 4 years old. So John's a foreman at a roofing products mill in Aberdeen, Washington. That's just a few miles away from Copalis Beach. On a Monday morning, sometime in July, John was several hours late for work. This was highly unusual. In fact, he was usually early getting the saws and the trucks ready for the day. When John showed up, he was visibly shaken. And when his supervisor asked him what was wrong, he said, "You know what, is there any way we can go to your office and speak so I can have a more private area to talk to you?" He didn't want others to hear anything that had went on, and you're going to find out why. So they went to this private location. They sat down. John said, "Something destroyed our house this weekend." His supervisor thought that he said someone broke into the house, and he asked John if it was someone he knew. John said, "No, you don't understand. This wasn't a person. This was, I don't really know what it was, but it completely trashed our house. The family is going to stay with my brother and Elma for a while." So John's supervisor asked him to explain exactly what happened. And John went on to tell all of the incredible details. He said when he had gotten home from work Friday evening, his youngest son, Tim, the 4-year-old, told him that he saw, and I quote, "a cowman walking at the edge of the field that afternoon." He assumed that the child meant a cowboy because some of their neighbors wore cowboy hats when they were out in the field.
Oh, okay.
So when he asked the boy if they were wearing cowboy hats, Tim said, "No, Daddy, he was a cowman, furry, and he stinks like the cows." Well, John asked Sue if she knew what he was talking about. And she said that Tim had been playing on the porch that afternoon. He came running in and said that there was a cowman stuck on the fence. He was very excited, so she went out to see what this was, all about. What's he talking about? She said that she opened the door and was immediately hit by a horrible smell, like wet dogs and garbage. Tim was pointing across the field to opposite where their house was and said, "Oh, he got loose." She looked over where he was pointing and she could see the top strand of the barbed wire bouncing up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Almost
Like he just had gotten
yeah,
off
like
of there.
somebody just maybe just took their hand down and let it go. And
Right.
she didn't see any type of animal, though, so she just kind of dismissed it. In fact, the only thing out of the ordinary was the smell. She did tell Tim to play inside for the rest of the day because she felt a little uneasy and a little bit scared because she just didn't know what he could have possibly seen. The older boy, John, he was at a friend's house, and he walked home just a short while after Tim saw this quote-unquote cowman. John told his mother that somebody followed him home. They were walking in the woods just off to the right side of the road. He never actually saw them because they never left the woods, but it had to be a really big man because he could hear large sticks cracking and the footsteps were very heavy. Once he got to the driveway to the house, the footsteps stopped.
That's a pretty good indication he was being followed for sure.
He was pretty shaken up by the event. He wanted his father to go to the woods and check it out for him, and that's exactly what would happen. Later that evening, John strapped on his .357 and he took his older son out to the field. They first checked out where Tim said he saw the cowman stuck on the fence, and they walked down the fence line, but everything looked to be okay. They did find something rather unusual, though. There was a large clump of long, reddish-brown hair tangled in the top strand of the barbed wire. John tried to pull it off, but it was like really tangled up. He pulled out his knife and just cut it off. It was over 1 foot long, real coarse and stringy like the horse mane or a horse tail.
Mm-hmm.
There appeared to be a lot of flesh matted to the clump.
Oh, that had to hurt.
The top wire was also pulled loose from one of the posts. Whatever was hung up on the fence had to be very big. So they climbed through the fence and they walked towards the woods. He couldn't find any type of hoof prints or any other tracks along the way. The edge of the woods began about 10 feet from the fence. They entered on a small game trail that was usually frequented by deer. It was around 8 p.m. and it was starting to get dark. They walked for a bit and they started to smell that rotten garbage / wet dog odor that his wife had spoken about. John started to have the feeling that they were being watched. The hair stood up on the back of his neck. He told John Jr. that they should just head back while they still had some daylight left, and they began walking back out of the woods. They could hear heavy footsteps off to their left. They would stop, and the footsteps would stop. They got to about the clearing when John whispered to his son to run like hell to the house on the count of 3.
Oh my gosh. That's terrifying.
So he whispered, 1, 2, 3, and he gave his son a push in the back to get him going. But John spun around and headed in the opposite direction toward the footsteps with his gun drawn. There's a lot of dense underbrush, so he had a hard time making headway. As he got close, he could hear it moving away from him deeper and deeper into the woods. John assumed that it was a vagrant camping out in the woods and possibly scouting out houses to rob at night. And John was a pretty good-sized man himself, and he had a gun, so he really wasn't worried about confronting a vagrant in the woods. Eventually, he heard the movement stop. As he looked into the woods, he thought he saw movement by a large tree. He aimed his gun, and then he gave the command, whoever was back there, to come out, nice and slow, or he would shoot. That's when he got a glimpse of the creature.
Oh my gosh. What do you look like?
It looked like a huge bear.
Oh.
He could only see bits and pieces through the thick vegetation. It was moving quietly on 4 legs. It was about 15 feet away from him at this point. Like I said, he thought it was a bear. But suddenly he saw a huge hairy arm with human-like hands reach out of the brush and grab a small alder tree. The tree was about 4 inches in diameter. It grabbed it about 5 feet up on the tree. It then pulled itself upright by holding the tree. It then stood on 2 legs. It turned its upper body and stared straight at John. It was enormous and definitely not a bear. It had to be over 7 foot tall, and at least half that across the chest. It was too dark to make out any facial features, but its eyes seemed to glow a deep red. He could see teeth because it appeared to be curling its lips back.
It was Elvis.
It lunged forward, breaking the tree that it had been holding on to. It then disappeared into the deep brush. He said it sounded like a bulldozer going through there with no engine sounds as it made its way through the woods.
Oh, so it didn't lunge toward him?
No. It dawned on John, though, that it was heading towards the house the way that his son had went.
Hope he got back there in time.
John ran to the trail, hoping to be able to cut it off before reaching the clearing. He could hear the creature thrashing through the woods as he was running. He got to the clearing and he searched frantically for his son. He spotted John Jr. just inside the fence, waiting for his dad. John screamed at him to run to the house. At this time, the creature emerged from the woods about 50 feet from his left. It crossed the 10-foot clearing and stepped over the fence in 2 strides and was running through the field towards his son in a matter of seconds. John screamed for his son to run faster, and he aimed his gun at the creature. He didn't want to shoot because he was afraid that he would hit his son or the house.
Mm-hmm.
So he just basically chased both of them. He could see it angling towards his son, who had no clue that it was even coming. He was focused on getting to the house. But John knew that there was no way that the boy was going to make it before this thing cut him off. In desperation, he pointed the gun to the ground at his side, and he fired, hoping to scare it. It didn't work. In fact, the creature just kind of veered even more sharply towards his son and put on a burst of speed. He heard John Jr. scream as the two collided. The creature dipped his shoulder, and in a second, John Jr. was airborne. He flew about 10 feet and then hit the ground rolling.
Ooh.
The creature never paused. It continued to run away at an amazing breakneck speed towards the woods.
So he just flipped the kid and then
Yep.
took off back to the woods.
Yep. John turned and he squared off and shot his 5 remaining rounds at the beast. He doesn't think that he hit it with any of the bullets because he said it never even slowed down. So he just assumes he missed him completely.
Mm-hmm.
John Jr., on the other hand, was shaken up, but he was physically fine. He asked his father if it was a bear because, like I said, he had no idea he was even being chased.
Right. Well, it's probably a good thing he did not know that.
He just knew something big and black ran over top of him. They both ended up running into the house. They locked the door behind them. They were out of breath and white as ghosts. His wife was in a panic because she had heard the gunshots. He filled her in when he actually could catch his breath and started to call the sheriff, but then he stopped in the middle of dialing the number to think exactly what he would have told the sheriff.
Mm-hmm. Because he would have thought he was crazy.
Right. So he hung up the phone, realizing what an idiot he would have looked like to say that the boogeyman had just chased him out of the woods. He told his wife that it was a large animal. He had no idea how to tell her that the 4-year-old was right and the cowman was real.